The Secret Teachings of All Ages by ManlyPHall. Part 23, Cryptograms and Freemasonry. Enjoy the listening. No treatise which deals with symbolism would be complete without a section devoted to the consideration of cryptograms. The use of ciphers has long been recognized as indispensable in military and diplomatic circles, but the modern world has overlooked the important role played by cryptography in literature and philosophy. If the art of deciphering cryptograms could be made popular, it would result in the discovery of much hitherto unsuspected wisdom possessed by both ancient and medieval philosophers. It would prove that many apparently verbose and rambling authors were wordy for the sake of concealing words. Ciphers are hidden in the most subtle manner. They may be concealed in the watermark of the paper upon which a book is printed. They may be bound into the covers of ancient books. They may be hidden under imperfect pagination. They may be extracted from the first letters of words or the first words of sentences. They may be artfully concealed in mathematical equations or in apparently unintelligible characters. They may be extracted from the jargon of clowns or revealed by heat as having been written in sympathetic ink. They may be word ciphers, letter ciphers, or apparently ambiguous statements whose meaning could be understood only by repeated careful readings. They may be discovered in the elaborately illuminated initial letters of early books, or they may be revealed by a process of counting words or letters. If those interested in Freemasonic research would give serious consideration to this subject, they might find in books and manuscripts of the 16th and 17th centuries the information necessary to bridge the gap in Masonic history that now exists between the mysteries of the ancient world and the craft masonry of the last 3 centuries. The arcana of the ancient mysteries were never revealed to the profane except through the media of symbols. Symbolism fulfilled the dual office of concealing the sacred truths from the uninitiated and revealing them to those qualified to understand the symbols. Forms are the symbols of formless divine principles. Symbolism is the language of nature. With reverence, the wise pierce the veil, and with clearer vision contemplate the reality. But the ignorant, unable to distinguish between the false and the true, behold a universe of symbols. It may well be said of nature, the Great Mother, that she is ever tracing strange characters upon the surface of things, but only to her eldest and wisest sons, as a reward for their faith and devotion, does she reveal the cryptic alphabet which is the key to the import of these tracings. The temples of the ancient mysteries evolved their own sacred languages, known only to their initiates and never spoken save in the sanctuary. The illumined priests considered it sacrilege to discuss the sacred truths of the higher worlds or the divine verities of eternal nature in the same tongue as that used by the vulgar for wrangling and dissension. A sacred science must needs be couched in a sacred language. Secret alphabets also were invented, and whenever the secrets of the wise were committed to writing, characters meaningless to the uninformed were employed. Such forms of writing were called sacred or Hermetic alphabets. Some, such as the famous angelic writing, are still retained in the higher degrees of Masonry. Secret alphabets were not entirely satisfactory, however, for although they rendered unintelligible the true nature of the writings, their very presence disclosed the fact of concealed information, which the priests also sought to conceal. Through patience or persecution, the keys to these alphabets were eventually acquired, and the contents of the documents revealed to the unworthy. This necessitated employment of more subtle methods for concealing the divine truths. The result was the appearance of cryptic systems of writing designed to conceal the presence of both the message and the cryptogram. Having thus devised a method of transmitting their secrets to posterity, the Illuminati encouraged the circulation of certain documents specially prepared through incorporating into them ciphers containing the deepest secrets of mysticism and philosophy. Thus, medieval philosophers disseminated their theories throughout Europe without evoking suspicion, since volumes containing these cryptograms could be subjected to the closest scrutiny without revealing the presence of the hidden message. During the Middle Ages, scores of writers, members of secret political or religious organizations, published books containing ciphers. Secret writing became a fad. Every European court had its own diplomatic cipher, and the intelligentsia vied with one another in devising curious and complicated cryptograms. The literature of the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries is permeated with ciphers, few of which have ever been decoded. Many of the magnificent scientific and philosophically intellects of this period dared not publish their findings because of the religious intolerance of their day. In order to preserve the fruitage of their intellectual labors for mankind, these pioneers of progress concealed their discoveries in ciphers, trusting that future generations, more kindly than their own, would discover and appreciate their learning. Many churchmen, it is interesting to note, used cryptograms, fearing excommunication or a worse fate should their scientific researches be suspected. Only recently, an intricate cipher of Roger Bacon's has been unraveled, revealing the fact that this early scientist was well versed in the cellular theory. Lecturing before the American Philosophical Society, Dr. William Romaine Newbold, who translated the cipher manuscript of the friar, declared, "There are drawings which so accurately portray the actual appearance of certain objects that it is difficult to resist the inference that Bacon had seen them with the microscope. These are spermatozoa, the body cells and the seminiferous tubes, the ova, with their nuclei distinctly indicated. There are 9 large drawings, of which one at least bears considerable resemblance to a certain stage of development of a fertilized cell." Had Roger Bacon failed to conceal this discovery under a complicated cipher, he would have been persecuted as a heretic and would probably have met the fate of other early liberal thinkers. In spite of the rapid progress made by science in the last 250 years, it still remains ignorant concerning many of the original discoveries made by medieval investigators. The only record of these important findings is that contained in the cryptograms of the volumes which they published. While many authors have written on the subject of cryptography, the books most valuable to students of philosophy and religion are Polygraphia and Steganographia by Trithemius, Abbot of Spanheim; Mercury or the Secret and Swift Messenger by John Wilkins, Bishop of Chester; Oedipus Egyptiacus and other works by Athanasius Kircher, Society of Jesus; and Cryptomenides's Et Cryptographiae by Gustavus Cellinus. To illustrate the basic differences in their construction and use, the various forms of ciphers are here grouped under 7 general headings. The literal cipher. The most famous of all literal cryptograms is the famous biliteral cipher described by Sir Francis Bacon in his De Augmentis Scientiarum. Lord Bacon originated the system while still a young man residing in Paris. The biliteral cipher requires the use of 2 styles of type, one an ordinary face and the other specially cut. The differences between the 2 fonts are in many cases so minute that it requires a powerful magnifying glass to detect them. Originally, the cipher messages were concealed only in the italicized words, sentences, or paragraphs, because the italic letters, being more ornate than the Roman letters, offered greater opportunity for concealing the slight but necessary variations. Sometimes the letters vary a trifle in size, at other times in thickness or in their ornamental flourishes. Later, Lord Bacon is believed to have had 2 Roman alphabets specially prepared, in which the differences were so trivial that it is almost impossible for experts to distinguish them. A careful inspection of the first 4 Shakespeare folios discloses the use throughout the volumes of several styles of type, differing in minute but distinguishable details. It is possible that all the Shakespeare folios contain ciphers running through the text. These ciphers may have been added to the original plays, which are much longer in the folios than in the original quartos, full scenes having been added in some instances. The biliteral cipher was not confined to the writings of Bacon and Shakespeare, however, but appears in many books published during Lord Bacon's lifetime and for nearly a century after his death. In referring to the biliteral cipher, Lord Bacon terms it omnia per omnia. The cipher may run through an entire book and be placed therein at the time of printing without the knowledge of the original author, for it does not necessitate the changing of either words or punctuation. It is possible that this cipher was inserted for political purposes into many documents and volumes published during the 17th century. It is well known that ciphers were used for the same reason as early as the Council of Nicaea. The Baconian biliteral cipher is difficult to use today, owing to the present exact standardization of type and the fact that so few books are now hand-set. Accompanying this chapter are facsimiles of Lord Bacon's biliteral alphabet as it appeared in the 1640 English translation of De Augmentis Scientiarum. There are 4 alphabets, 2 for the capital and 2 for the small letters. Consider carefully the differences between these 4 and note that each alphabet has the power of either the letter A or the letter B, and that when reading a word its letters are divisible into one of 2 groups, those which correspond to the letter A and those which correspond to the letter B. In order to employ the biliteral cipher, a document must contain 5 times as many letters as there are in the cipher message to be concealed, for it requires 5 letters to conceal one. The biliteral cipher somewhat resembles a telegraph code in which letters are changed into dots and dashes. According to the biliteral system, however, the dots and dashes are represented respectively by A's and B's. The word biliteral is derived from the fact that all letters of the alphabet may be reduced to either O or B. An example of biliteral writing is shown in one of the accompanying diagrams. In order to demonstrate the working of this cipher, the message concealed within the words, wisdom and understanding are more to be desired than riches, will now be deciphered. The first step is to discover the letters of each alphabet and replace them by their equivalent A or B in accordance with the key given by Lord Bacon in his biliteral alphabet. In the word wisdom, the W is from the B alphabet. Therefore, it is replaced by a B. The I is from the A alphabet. Therefore, an A is put in its place. The S is also from the A alphabet, but the D belongs to the B alphabet. The O and the M both belong to the A alphabet. Thus, the word wisdom becomes Baba, treating the remaining words of the sentence in a similar manner, and becomes Aba. Understanding, Ayabab, Are Aba, more Ab to Ab, B Ab, desired Ababa, then Abba, riches Aa. The next step is to run all the letters together. Thus, Babiabababababababababa. All the combinations used in the Baconian biliteral cipher consist of groups containing 5 letters each. Therefore, the solid line of letters must be broken into groups of 5 in the following manner. Baba Abba Abba Ayab Ababa Abba Babab Abba Abba Aha. Each of these groups of 5 letters now represents one letter of the cipher, and the actual letter can now be determined by comparing the groups with the alphabetical table, the key to the biliteral cipher, from De Augmentis Scientiarum. Baba equals T, Abba equals E, Abba equals E, Ab equals B, Ababa equals L, Abba equals P, Babab equals X, Abba equals E, Abba equals E, Aha equals A, but the last 5 letters of the word riches being set off by a period from the initial R, the last 5 A's do not count in the cipher. The letters thus extracted are now brought together in order, resulting in TBLPXE. At this point, the inquirer might reasonably expect the letters to make intelligible words, but he will very likely be disappointed, for, as in the case above, the letters thus extracted are themselves a cryptogram, doubly involved to discourage those who might have a casual acquaintance with the biliteral system. The next step is to apply the 9 letters to what is commonly called a wheel or disk cipher, which consists of 2 alphabets, one revolving around the other in such a manner that numerous transpositions of letters are possible. In the accompanying cut, the A of the inner alphabet is opposite the H of the outer alphabet, so that for cipher purposes these letters are interchangeable. The F and M, the P and Y, the W and D, in fact all the letters, may be transposed as shown by the 2 circles. The 9 letters extracted by the biliteral cipher may thus be exchanged for 9 others by the wheel cipher. The 9 letters are considered as being on the inner circle of the wheel and are exchanged for the 9 letters on the outer circle, which are opposite the inner letters. By this process, the T becomes A, the 2 E's become 2 L's. The B becomes I, the L becomes S, the P becomes W, the X becomes E, and the 2 E's become 2 L's. The result is ALLISWLL, which, broken up into words, reads, all is well. Of course, by moving the inner disk of the wheel cipher, many different combinations in addition to the one given above can be made of the letters, but this is the only one which will produce sense, and the cryptogrammatist must keep on experimenting until he discovers a logical and intelligible message. He may then feel reasonably sure that he has deciphered the system. Lord Bacon involved the biliteral cipher in many different ways. There are probably a score of different systems used in the Shakespeare folio alone, some so intricate that they may forever baffle all attempts at their decipherment. In those susceptible of solution, sometimes the A's and B's have to be exchanged. At other times, the concealed message is written backwards. Again, only every other letter is counted, and so on. There are several other forms of the literal cipher in which letters are substituted for each other by a prearranged sequence. The simplest form is that in which two alphabets are written thus: a B C D E F G H I K L M N, Z Y X W T S R Q P O N M, O P Q R S T U W X Y Z, L K I H G F E D C B A. By substituting the letters of the lower alphabet for their equivalents in the upper one, a meaningless conglomeration results, the hidden message being decoded by reversing the process. There is also a form of the literal cipher in which the actual cryptogram is written in the body of the document, but unimportant words are inserted between important ones according to a prearranged order. The literal cipher also includes what are called acrostic signatures. That is, words written down the column by the use of the first letter of each line, and also more complicated acrostics in which the important letters are scattered through entire paragraphs or chapters. The two accompanying alchemical cryptograms illustrate another form of the literal cipher involving the first letter of each word. Every cryptogram based upon the arrangement or combination of the letters of the alphabet is called a literal cipher. The pictorial cipher. Any picture or drawing with other than its obvious meaning may be considered a pictorial cryptogram. Instances of pictorial cipher are frequently found in Egyptian symbolism and early religious art. The diagrams of alchemists and Hermetic philosophers are invariably pictorial ciphers. In addition to the simple pictorial cipher, there is a more technical form in which words or letters are concealed by the number of stones in a wall, by the spread of birds' wings in flight, by ripples on the surface of water, or by the length and order of lines used in shading. Such cryptograms are not obvious and must be decoded with the aid of an arbitrary measuring scale, the length of the lines determining the letter or word concealed. The shape and proportion of a building, the height of a tower, the number of bars in a window, the folds of a man's garments, even the proportions or attitude of the human body, were used to conceal definite figures or characters which could be exchanged for letters or words by a person acquainted with the code. Initial letters of names were secreted in architectural arches and spans. A notable example of this practice is found on the title page of Montague's Essays, 3rd edition, where an initial B is formed by two arches and an F by a broken arch. Pictorial cryptograms are sometimes accompanied by the key necessary for their decipherment. A figure may point toward the starting point of the cipher or carry in its hand some implement disclosing the system of measurement used. There are also frequent instances in which the cryptographer purposely distorted or improperly clothed some figure in his drawing by placing the hat on backwards, the sword on the wrong side, or the shield on the wrong arm, or by employing some similar artifice. The much-discussed fifth finger on the Pope's hand in Raphael's Sistine Madonna and the sixth toe on Joseph's foot in the same artist's Marriage of the Virgin are cunningly concealed cryptograms. The achromatic cipher. The religious and philosophical writings of all nations abound with achromatic cryptograms, that is, parables and allegories. The achromatic is unique in that the document containing it may be translated or reprinted without affecting the cryptogram. Parables and allegories have been used since remote antiquity to present moral truths in an attractive and understandable manner. The achromatic cryptogram is a pictorial cipher drawn in words, and its symbolism must be so interpreted. The Old and New Testaments of the Jews, the writings of Plato and Aristotle, Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, Virgil's Aeneid, the Metamorphosis of Apuleius, and Aesop's fables are outstanding examples of achromatic cryptography in which are concealed the deepest and most sublime truths of ancient mystical philosophy. The achromatic cipher is the most subtle of all, for the parable or allegory is susceptible of several interpretations. Bible students for centuries have been confronted by this difficulty. They are satisfied with the moral interpretation of the parable and forget that each parable and allegory is capable of 7 interpretations, of which the 7th, the highest, is complete and all-inclusive, whereas the other 6, and lesser, interpretations are fragmentary, revealing but part of the mystery. The creation myths of the world are achromatic cryptograms, and the deities of the various pantheons are only cryptic characters which, if properly understood, become the constituents of a divine alphabet. The initiated few comprehend the true nature of this alphabet, but the uninitiated many worship the letters of it as gods. The numerical cipher. Many cryptograms have been produced in which numbers in various sequences are substituted for letters, words, or even complete thoughts. The reading of numerical ciphers usually depends upon the possession of specially arranged tables of correspondences. The numerical cryptograms of the Old Testament are so complicated that only a few scholars versed in rabbinical lore have ever sought to unravel their mysteries. In his Oedipus Egyptiacus, Athanasius Kircher describes several Arabian Qabbalistic theorems, and a great part of the Pythagorean mystery was concealed in a secret method in vogue among Greek mystics of substituting letters for numbers. The most simple numerical cipher is that in which the letters of the alphabet are exchanged for numbers in ordinary sequence. Thus it becomes 1, B2, C3, and so on, counting both I and J as 9 and both U and V as 20. The word yes by this system would be written 23518. This cipher can be made more difficult by reversing the alphabet so that Z becomes 1, Y2, X3, and so on. By inserting a non-significant, or uncounted, number after each of the significant numbers, the cipher is still more effectively concealed. Thus, 23165918. The word yes is found by eliminating the second and fourth numbers. By adding 23, 5, and 18 together, the sum 46 results. Therefore, 46 is the numerical equivalent of the word yes. According to the simple numerical cipher, the sum 138 is equal to the words "note carefully." Therefore, in a book using this method, line 138, page 138, or paragraph 138 may contain the concealed message. In addition to this simple numerical cipher, there are scores of others so complicated that no one without the key can hope to solve them. Authors sometimes base their cryptograms upon the numerical value of their own names. For example, Sir Francis Bacon repeatedly used the cryptic number 33, the numerical equivalent of his name. Numerical ciphers often involve the pagination of a book. Imperfect pagination, though generally attributed to carelessness, often conceals important secrets. The mispaginations found in the 1623 folio of Shakespeare and the consistent recurrence of similar errors in various volumes printed about the same period have occasioned considerable thought among scholars and cryptogrammatists. In Baconian cryptograms, all page numbers ending in 89 seem to have a special significance. The 89th page of the comedies in the 1623 folio of Shakespeare shows an error of type in the pagination, the 9 being from a considerably smaller font than the 8. The 189th page is entirely missing, there being 2 pages numbered 187. And page 188 shows the second 8, scarcely more than half the size of the first one. Page 289 is correctly numbered and has no unusual features, but page 89 of the histories is missing. Several volumes published by Bacon show similar errors, page 89 being often involved. There are also numerical ciphers from which the cryptic message may be extracted by counting every 10th word, every 20th word, or every 50th word. In some cases, the count is irregular. The first important word may be found by counting 100, the second by counting 90, the third by counting 80, and so on until the count of 10 is reached. The count then returns to 100 and the process is repeated. The musical cipher. John Wilkins, afterwards Bishop of Chester, in 1641 circulated an anonymous essay entitled Mercury, or The Secret and Swift Messenger. In this little volume, which was largely derived from the more voluminous treatises of Trithemius and Selinus, the author sets forth a method whereby musicians can converse with each other by substituting musical notes for the letters of the alphabet. Two persons understanding the code could converse with each other by merely playing certain notes upon a piano or other instrument. Musical cryptograms can be involved to an inconceivable point. By certain systems, it is possible to take an already existing musical theme and conceal in it a cryptogram without actually changing the composition in any way. The pennants upon the notes may conceal the cipher, or the actual sounds of the notes may be exchanged for syllables of similar sound. This latter method is effective, but its scope is somewhat limited. Several musical compositions by Sir Francis Bacon are still in existence. An examination of them might reveal musical cryptograms, for it is quite certain that Lord Bacon was well acquainted with the manner of their construction. The arbitrary cipher. The system of exchanging letters of the alphabet for hieroglyphic figures is too easily decoded to be popular. Albert Pike describes an arbitrary cipher based upon the various parts of the Knights Templar's cross, each angle representing a letter. The many curious alphabets that have been devised are rendered worthless, however, by the table of recurrence. According to Edgar Allan Poe, a great cryptogrammatist, the most common letter of the English language is E. The other letters in their order of frequency are as follows: A, O, I, D, H, N, R, S, T, V, Y, C, F, Q, L, M, W, B, K, P, Q, X, Z. Other authorities declare the table of frequency to be E, T, A, O, N, I, R, S, H, D, L, C, W, U, M, F, Y, G, P, B, V, K, X, Q, J, Z. By merely counting the number of times each character appears in the message, the law of recurrence discloses the English letter for which the arbitrary character stands. Further help is also rendered by the fact that if the cryptogram be split up into words, there are only 3 single letters which may form words. I, O. Thus, any single character set off from the rest of the text must be one of these 3 letters. For details of this system, see The Gold Bug by Edgar Allan Poe. To render more difficult the decoding of arbitrary ciphers, however, the characters are seldom broken up into words. And further, the table of recurrence is partly nullified by assigning 2 or more different characters to each letter, thereby making it impossible to estimate accurately the frequency of recurrence. Therefore, the greater the number of arbitrary characters used to represent any single letter of the alphabet, the more difficult it is to decipher an arbitrary cryptogram. The secret alphabets of the ancients are comparatively easy to decode, the only requisites being a table of frequency, a knowledge of the language in which the cryptogram was originally written, a moderate amount of patience, and a little ingenuity. The code cipher. The most modern form of cryptogram is the code system. Its most familiar form is the Morse code for use in telegraphic and wireless communication. This form of cipher may be complicated somewhat by embodying dots and dashes into a document in which periods and colons are dots, while commas and semicolons are dashes. There are also codes used by the business world which can be solved only by the use of a private code book. Because they furnish an economical and efficient method of transmitting confidential information, the use of such codes is far more prevalent than the average person has any suspicion. In addition to the foregoing classifications, there are a number of miscellaneous systems of secret writing, some employing mechanical devices, others colors. A few make use of sundry miscellaneous objects to represent words and even complete thoughts. But as these more elaborate devices were seldom employed by the ancients or by the medieval philosophers and alchemists, they have no direct bearing upon religion and philosophy. The mystics of the Middle Ages, borrowing the terminology of the various arts and sciences, evolved a system of cryptography which concealed the secrets of the human soul under terms generally applied to chemistry, biology, astronomy, botany, and physiology. Ciphers of this nature can only be decoded by individuals versed in the deep philosophical principles upon which these medieval mystics based their theories of life. Much information relating to the invisible nature of man is concealed under what seem to be chemical experiments or scientific speculations. Every student of symbolism and philosophy, therefore, should be reasonably well acquainted with the underlying principles of cryptography. In addition to serving him well in his researches, this art furnishes a fascinating method of developing the acuteness of the mental faculties. Discrimination and observation are indispensable to the seeker after knowledge, and no study is equal to cryptography as a means of stimulating these powers. In several early Masonic manuscripts, for example, the Harleian, Sloane, Lansdowne, and Edinburgh Kilwinning, it is stated that the craft of initiated builders existed before the deluge, and that its members were employed in the building of the Tower of Babel. A Masonic constitution dated 1701 gives the following naive account of the origin of the sciences, arts, and crafts from which the major part of Masonic symbolism is derived. How this worthy science was first begun, I shall tell. Before Noah's flood, there was a man called Lamech, as it is written in the 4th chap. Of Jen and this Lamech had 2 wives. The one was called Adah, and the other Zillah. By the first wife Adah he got 2 sons, the one called Jabal and the other Jubal, and by the other wife Zillah he got a son and daughter, and the 4 children found the beginning of all crafts in the world. This Jabal was the elder son, and he found the craft of geometric, and he parted flocks, as of sheep and lambs in the fields, and first wrought houses of stone and tree, as it is noted in the chap aforesaid, and his brother Jubal found the craft of music, of songs, organs, and harp. The third brother Tubal-Cain found out smith's craft to work iron and steel, and their sister Nama found out the art of weaving. These children did know that God would take vengeance for sin, either by fire or water, wherefore they wrote these sciences which they had found in 2 pillars of stone, that they might be found after the flood. The one stone was called marble, cannot burn with fire, and the other was called lacherous, brass, that cannot drown in the water. The author of this constitution thereupon declares that one of these pillars was later discovered by Hermes, who communicated to mankind the secrets thereon inscribed. In his Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus writes that Adam had forewarned his descendants that sinful humanity would be destroyed by a deluge. In order to preserve their science and philosophy, the children of Seth therefore raised 2 pillars, one of brick and the other of stone, on which were inscribed the keys to their knowledge. The patriarch Enoch, whose name means the initiator, is evidently a personification of the sun, since he lived 365 years. He also constructed an underground temple consisting of 9 vaults, one beneath the other, placing in the deepest vault a triangular tablet of gold bearing upon it the absolute and ineffable name of deity. According to some accounts, Enoch made 2 golden deltas. The larger he placed upon the white cubical altar in the lowest vault, and the smaller he gave into the keeping of his son, Methuselah, who did the actual construction work of the brick chambers according to the pattern revealed to his father by the Most High. In the form and arrangement of these vaults, Enoch epitomized the 9 spheres of the ancient mysteries and the 9 sacred strata of the earth through which the initiate must pass to reach the flaming spirit dwelling in its central core. According to Freemasonic Symbolism, Enoch, fearing that all knowledge of the sacred mysteries would be lost at the time of the deluge, erected the 2 columns mentioned in the quotation. Upon the metal column, in appropriate allegorical symbols, he engraved the secret teaching, and upon the marble column placed an inscription stating that a short distance away a priceless treasure would be discovered in a subterranean vault. After having thus faithfully completed his labors, Enoch was translated from the brow of Mount Moriah. In time, the location of the secret vaults was lost, but after the lapse of ages there came another builder, an initiate after the order of Enoch, and he, while laying the foundations for another temple to the great architect of the universe, discovered the long-lost vaults and the secrets contained within. John Leland was appointed by King Henry VIII to go through the archives of the various religious institutions dissolved by the king and remove for preservation any books or manuscripts of an important character. Among the documents copied by Leland was a series of questions and answers concerning the mystery of Masonry written by King Henry VI. In answer to the question, how came Masonry into England? The document states that Peter Gower, a Grecian, traveled for knowledge in Egypt, Syria, and every land where the Phoenicians had planted Masonry. Winning entrance in all lodges of Masons, he learned much and returning, dwelt in Greater Greece. He became renowned for his wisdom, formed a great lodge at Groton, and made many Masons, some of whom journeyed in France, spreading Masonry there. From France, in the course of time, the order passed into England. To even the superficial student of the subject, it must be evident that the name of Peter Gower, the Grecian, is merely an anglicized form of Pythagoras. Consequently, Groton, where he formed his lodge, is easily identified with Crotona. A link is thus established between the philosophically mysteries of Greece and medieval Freemasonry. In his notes on King Henry's questions and answers, William Preston enlarges upon the vow of secrecy as it was practiced by the ancient initiates. On the authority of Pliny, he describes how Anaxarchus, having been imprisoned in order to extort from him some of the secrets with which he had been entrusted, bit out his own tongue and threw it in the face of Nicocreon, the tyrant of Cyprus. Preston adds that the Athenians revered a brazen statue that was represented without a tongue to denote the sanctity with which they regarded their oath-bound secrets. It is also noteworthy that, according to King Henry's manuscript, Masonry had its origin in the East and was the carrier of the arts and sciences of civilization to the primitive humanity of the Western nations. Conspicuous among the symbols of Freemasonry are the 7 liberal arts and sciences. By grammar, man is taught to express in noble and adequate language his innermost thoughts and ideals. By rhetoric, he is enabled to conceal his ideals under the protecting cover of ambiguous language and figures of speech. By logic, he is trained in the organization of the intellectual faculties with which he has been endowed. By arithmetic, he not only is instructed in the mystery of universal order, but also gains the key to multitude, magnitude, and proportion. By geometry, he is inducted into the mathematics of form, the harmony and rhythm of angles, and the philosophy of organization. By music, he is reminded that the universe is founded upon the laws of celestial harmonics, and that harmony and rhythm are all-pervading. By astronomy, he gains an understanding of the immensities of time and space, of the proper relationship between himself and the universe, and of the awesomeness of that unknown power which is driving the countless stars of the firmament through illimitable space. Equipped with the knowledge conferred by familiarity with the liberal arts and sciences, the studious Freemason therefore finds himself confronted by few problems with which he cannot cope. The most celebrated of the ancient fraternities of artisans was that of the Dionysiac Architects. This organization was composed exclusively of initiates of the Bacchus Dionysos cult and was peculiarly consecrated to the science of building and the art of decoration. Acclaimed as being the custodians of a secret and sacred knowledge of architectonics, its members were entrusted with the design and erection of public buildings and monuments. The superlative excellence of their handiwork elevated the members of the guild to a position of surpassing dignity. They were regarded as the master craftsmen of the earth. Because of the first dances held in honor of Dionysos, he was considered the founder and patron of the theater, and the Dionysians specialized in the construction of buildings adapted for the presentation of dramatic performances. In the circular or semicircular orchestra, they invariably erected an altar to Aeschylus, the famous Greek poet, for while appearing in one of his own plays, he was suspected by a mob of angry spectators of revealing one of the profound secrets of the mysteries, and was forced to seek refuge at the altar of Dionysos. So carefully did the Dionysiac architects safeguard the secrets of their craft that only fragmentary records exist of their esoteric teachings. John A. Weiss thus sums up the meager data available concerning the order. They made their appearance certainly not later than 1000 BC and appear to have enjoyed particular privileges and immunities. They also possessed secret means of recognition and were bound together by special ties only known to themselves. The richer of this fraternity were bound to provide for their poorer brethren. They were divided into communities, governed by a master and wardens, and called gynoikiai, connected houses. They held a grand festival annually and were held in high esteem. Their ceremonials were regarded as sacred. It has been claimed that Solomon, at the instance of Hiram, king of Tyre, employed them at his temple and palaces. They were also employed at the construction of the temple of Diana at Ephesus. They had means of intercommunication all over the then known world, and from them, doubtless, sprang the guilds of the traveling masons known in the Middle Ages. The fraternity of the Dionysiac architects spread throughout all of Asia Minor, even reaching Egypt and India. They established themselves in nearly all the countries bordering on the Mediterranean, and with the rise of the Roman Empire, found their way into Central Europe and even into England. The most stately and enduring buildings in Constantinople, Rhodes, Athens, and Rome were erected by these inspired craftsmen. One of the most illustrious of their number was Vitruvius, the great architect, renowned as the author of De Architectura Libri Decem. In the various sections of his book, Vitruvius gives several hints as to the philosophy underlying the Dionysiac concept of the principle of symmetry applied to the science of architecture, as derived from a consideration of the proportions established by nature between the parts and members of the human body. The following extract from Vitruvius on the subject of symmetry is representative. The design of a temple depends on symmetry, the principles of which must be most carefully observed by the architect. They are due to proportion in analogia. Proportion is a correspondence among the measures of the members of an entire work and of the whole to a certain part selected as standard. From this result the principles of symmetry. Without symmetry and proportion, there can be no principles in the design of any temple. That is, if there is no precise relation between its members, as in the case of those of a well-shaped man. For the human body is so designed by nature that the face, from the chin to the top of the forehead and the lowest roots of the hair, is a tenth part of the whole height. The open hand from the wrist to the tip of the middle finger is just the same. The head from the chin to the crown is an eighth, and with the neck and shoulder from the top of the breast to the lowest roots of the hair is a sixth. From the middle of the breast to the summit of the crown is a fourth. If we take the height of the face itself, the distance from the bottom of the chin to the underside of the nostrils, and from that point to a line between the eyebrows is the same. From there to the lowest roots of the hair is also a third, comprising the forehead. The length of the foot is 1/6 of the height of the body. Of the forearm, 1/4, and the breadth of the breast is also 1/4. The other members, too, have their own symmetrical proportions, and it was by employing them that the famous painters and sculptors of antiquity attained to great and endless renown. The edifices raised by the Dionysiac builders were indeed sermons in stone. Though unable to comprehend fully the cosmic principles thus embodied in these masterpieces of human ingenuity and industry, even the uninitiated were invariably overwhelmed by the sense of majesty and symmetry resulting from the perfect coordination of pillars, spans, arches, and domes. By variations in the details of size, material, type, arrangement, ornamentation, and color, these inspired builders believed it possible to provoke in the nature of the onlooker certain distinct mental or emotional reactions. Vitruvius, for example, describes the disposition of bronze vases about a room so as to produce certain definite changes in the tone and quality of the human voice. In like manner, each chamber in the mysteries through which the candidate passed had its own peculiar acoustics. Thus, in one chamber, the voice of the priest was amplified until his words caused the very room to vibrate, while in another the voice was diminished and softened to such a degree that it sounded like the distant tinkling of silver bells. Again, in some of the underground passageways, the candidate was apparently bereft of the power of speech. For though he shouted at the top of his voice, not even a whisper was audible to his ears. After progressing a few feet, however, he would discover that his softest sigh would be reached 100 times. The supreme ambition of the Dionysiac Architects was the construction of buildings which would create distinct impressions consistent with the purpose for which the structure itself was designed. In common with the Pythagoreans, they believed it possible by combinations of straight lines and curves to induce any desired mental attitude or emotion. They labored, therefore, to the end of producing a building perfectly harmonious with the structure of the universe itself. They may have even believed that an edifice so constructed, because it was in no respect at variance with any existing reality, would not be subject to dissolution, but would endure throughout the span of mortal time. As a logical deduction from their philosophically trend of thought, such a building, en rapport with cosmos, would also have become an oracle. Certain early works on magical philosophy hint that the Ark of the Covenant was oracular in character because of specially prepared chambers in its interior. These, by their shape and arrangement, were so attuned to the vibrations of the invisible world that they caught and amplified the voices of the ages imprinted upon and eternally existent in the substance of the astral light. Unskilled in these ancient subtleties of their profession, modern architects often create architectural absurdities which would cause their creators to blush with shame, did they comprehend their actual symbolic import. Thus, phallic emblems are strewn in profusion among the adornments of banks, office buildings, and department stores. Christian churches also may be surmounted with Brahmin or Mohammedan domes, or be designed in a style suitable for a Jewish synagogue or a Greek temple to Pluto. These incongruities may be considered trivial in importance by the modern designer, but to the trained psychologist the purpose for which a building was erected is frustrated in large measure by the presence of such architectural discordances. Vitruvius thus defines the principle of propriety as conceived and applied by the Dionysians. Propriety is that perfection of style which comes when a work is authoritatively constructed on approved principles. It arises from prescription, from usage, or from nature. From prescription in the case of hypaethral edifices open to the sky, in honor of Jupiter lightning, the heaven, the sun, or the moon. For these are gods whose semblances and manifestations we behold before our very eyes in the sky when it is cloudless and bright. The temples of Minerva, Mars, and Hercules will be Doric, since the virile strength of these gods makes daintiness entirely inappropriate to their houses. In temples to Venus, Flora, Proserpine, Springwater, and the nymphs, the Corinthian order will be found to have peculiar significance, because these are delicate divinities, and so its rather slender outlines, its flowers, leaves, and ornamental volutes will lend propriety where it is due. The construction of temples of the Ionic order to Juno, Diana, Father Bacchus, and the other gods of that kind will be in keeping with the middle position which they hold. For the building of such will be an appropriate combination of the severity of the Doric and the delicacy of the Corinthian. In describing the societies of Ionian artificers, Joseph da Costa declares the Dionysiac rites to have been founded upon the science of astronomy, which by the initiates of this order was correlated to the builder's art. In various documents dealing with the origin of architecture are found hints to the effect that the great buildings erected by these initiated craftsmen were based upon geometrical patterns derived from the constellations. Thus, a temple might be planned according to the constellation of Pegasus, or a court of judgment modeled after the constellation of the scales. The Dionysians evolved a peculiar code by which they were able to communicate with one another in the dark, and both the symbols and the terminology of their guild were derived, in the main, from the elements of architecture. While stigmatized as pagans by reason of their philosophically principles, it is noteworthy that these Dionysiac craftsmen were almost universally employed in the erection of early Christian abbeys and cathedrals, whose stones even to this very day bear distinguishing marks and symbols cut into their surfaces by these illustrious builders. Among the ornate carvings upon the fronts of great churches of the Old World are frequently found representations of compasses, squares, rules, mallets, and clusters of builders' tools skillfully incorporated into mural decorations, and even placed in the hands of the effigies of saints and prophets standing in exalted niches. A great mystery was contained in the ancient portals of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which were destroyed during the French Revolution, for among their carvings were numerous Rosicrucian and Masonic emblems. And according to the records preserved by alchemists who studied their bas-reliefs, the secret processes for metallic transmutation were set forth in their grotesque, yet most significant figures. The checkerboard floor upon which the modern Freemasonic Lodge stands is the old tracing board of the Dionysiac Architects. And while the modern organization is no longer limited to workmen's guilds, it still preserves in its symbols the metaphysical doctrines of the ancient society of which it is presumably the outgrowth. The investigator of the origin of Freemasonic symbolism, who desires to trace the development of the order through the ages, will find a practical suggestion in the following statement of Charles W. Heckethorn. But considering that Freemasonry is a tree the roots of which spread through so many soils, it follows that traces thereof must be found in its fruit. That its language and ritual should retain much of the various sects and institutions it has passed through before arriving at their present state. And in Masonry, we meet with Indian, Egyptian, Jewish, and Christian ideas, terms therefrom the supreme ambition of their craft and symbols. The Roman collegia of skilled architects were apparently a subdivision of the greater Ionian body, their principles and organization being practically identical with the older Ionian institution. It has been suspected that the Dionysians also profoundly influenced early Islamic culture, for part of their symbolism found its way into the mysteries of the dervishes. At one time, the Dionysians referred to themselves as sons of Solomon, and one of the most important of their symbols was the seal of Solomon, two interlaced triangles. This motif is frequently seen in conspicuous parts of Mohammedan mosques. The Knights Templars, who were suspected of anything and everything, are believed to have contacted these Dionysiac artificers and to have introduced many of their symbols and doctrines into medieval Europe. But Freemasonry most of all owes to the Dionysiac cult the great mass of its symbols and rituals which are related to the science of architecture. From these ancient and illustrious artisans, it also received the legacy of the unfinished temple of civilization, that vast, invisible structure upon which these initiated builders have labored continuously since the inception of their fraternity. This mighty edifice, which has fallen and been rebuilt time after time, but whose foundations remain unmoved, is the true everlasting house of which the temple on the brow of Mount Moriah was but an impermanent symbol. Aside from the operative aspect of their order, the Dionysiac Architects had a speculative philosophically code. Human society they considered as a rough and untrued ashlar, but lately chiseled from the quarry of elemental nature. This crude block was the true object upon which these skilled craftsmen labored, polishing it, squaring it, and with the aid of fine carvings transforming it into a miracle of beauty. While mystics released their souls from the bondage of matter by meditation, and philosophers found their keenest joy in the profundities of thought, these masterworkmen achieved liberation from the wheel of life and death by learning to swing their hammers with the same rhythm that moves the swirling forces of cosmos. They venerated the deity under the guise of a great architect and master craftsman who was ever gouging rough ashlars from the fields of space and truing them into universes. The Dionysians affirmed constructiveness to be the supreme expression of the soul, and attuning themselves with the ever-visible constructive natural processes going on around them, believed immortality could be achieved by thus becoming a part of the creative agencies of nature.